Hello. So this is my Hail Mary. I think I changed the last setting that I could change to make sure that the video is kind of like regular quality and it isn't like super light or anything. So, let's wait and see if this is going to work out. So yeah, first things first, like this is my new dress. I'll show it to you. This is, oh, you can see, but like it has, like this frilly thing at the end. And I know, I really like it. I feel that it is very elegant. I love the color. I love, like the way that the bodice is kind of like framing my body. And it was pretty cheap. It was on sale. And one of those no true sales. Not, like one that is just, there for show. But yeah, so today I have my swimming lessons in the afternoon, and then I have college. And basically, something that kind of like came to mind, yesterday as I was, thinking about my life and how everything is working great lately, is that because I feel like some people, like, or a lot of people, they end up resorting to religion, to God, whatever, when their life is kind of like falling apart. And I have my life has falling apart before, and usually that does not get me closer to God or to anything like that. And it's not like I suddenly believe in things, but I was kind of like thinking about how like everything is working perfectly and how like that is getting me to what, like maybe there is God. I still don't believe in the supernatural. I still like don't truly believe it, but if there's anything that's going to get me closer is the fact that like everything is working fine. So what do I mean by this? So financially I'm like doing okay. Of course, like my goal in the future is to kind of like get up in the corporate ladder, and kind of like get to make more money basically, so I can not only survive, but I can also exist, doing things that bring joy to my life, that kind of stuff. So that is like something that is like in the future, and that I will like it's going to get increasingly more important, particularly now with college. And like that is another thing that is like working out pretty great. I am I'm kind of like I'm very much enjoying like now I've had like a full week. It's Tuesday, but like last Monday you have complementary activities that I had to do, so I didn't really have class. So what, the last class that I hadn't really had before was yesterday. And I like I feel like not only like am I enjoying the classes, the lessons, the things I'm learning, but I feel like things are doable. I think that the assignments, like the projects, everything we have to do, I feel like I am fully capable of doing those things. And also something that I was kind of like observing in my head, because historically I've always been like a straight A student. Like I've always aimed for like the 100% mark, and I think that's like really commendable. And like it's not that right now I'm going to give up on that, but I'm kind of like getting kind of like cozy with the idea that what, like passing is kind of like good, because I feel like if I kind of like add the pressure to my life, that to kind of like score the highest grades, like I will kind of like add unnecessary pressure to my life. So yeah, I'm going to do my best, and if I pass, I pass, and like that's kind of like part of the journey. I know that this sounds like a downgrade, but it's not. It's just like because I feel like that this is something that has gotten in the way of like me and my previous like attempts at attending college, because basically I was very kind of like it was like either all or nothing. So if I sometimes I felt like I didn't really do things because I kind of like was afraid that I wouldn't really get that 100%. So as I said, like right now I just want I want to learn, because I think I want to acquire knowledge, because I want to work in this area. So like it's pretty much where I'm at when like everything's going great. So finances pretty stable, and is stable for the foreseeable future, so that is pretty good. College, I'm enjoying myself, and not only enjoying myself, I feel like that things are doable. I feel like I can it's not like that I can do the assignments. I feel like that they are right up my alley in terms of like my skill set. For example, like usually making reports, or like having assignments where I have to dissect things, like I tend to do well with that, and that is like a lot of like what we're going to be studying. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to these assignments, which something that my mom commented, that she saw me working on an assignment which she had not seen me do in years. Maybe even like from, because I have worked as back in 2019, like that was my first year of college, and like that year I was doing great, like I was doing very well. I was able to kind of like do things, but since then, like it's been a bit of a mess. It's been very hit or miss, and mostly misses. So it's interesting for me to get to this point where I'm like doing these assignments and taking the time to do them. And for example, this particular assignment that I was working on yesterday is only due like 2 weeks from now, and yet it's not 2 weeks now because it was from Thursday, so 2 weeks from last Thursday. But like I'm excited about this. I was like I was really digging deep, so much so that like this is supposed to be like a 2-3 page assignment, maybe 3 pages, and like my document is 21 pages long. So like that was something. So I had to condense it, and I will do that. I was already doing that, but I'm happy. I'm acquiring knowledge, and I'm really enjoying like the knowledge that I have, and also like it's good because it feels like this is something like important. Like I'm studying archaeology, and archiving things like that is important to kind of like for you to retain knowledge, for you to share knowledge, so you can kind of like build on what's already there, and documents, stuff like they have like there's so many different facets to it. There's so many different. Hold up. Let me see if you can see my dress from here. Yeah, still going. But yeah, so dealing with documents, like that is something that I can actually see myself doing, in the future. And as I said, like it is that we're kind of like dealing with history here. There's so much that documents can kind of like tell about stuff. It can validate things. It can help to identify things. People, situations, like history and all that. So it feels important. It feels like this is something that is kind of like I want to be a very productive member of society. When I work with this, so I'm kind of like excited about the future and about like I don't know in which area I'm gonna work on, but I feel like I'm going to learn to tackle things. And I think that there's a lot of like room for growth. Although something that my professor said yesterday, which is very relevant, is that a lot of people, they do not see the importance of archives and all that. So sometimes like when you get into an environment where you have to do that, you have to create a whole you have to do like this very you have to dig deep down to kind of like create like a department or environment where people kind of like value that. So that is not fun, but it is part of it. So there is this element of like educating people. I haven't historically been like a good teacher or even like a willing teacher, but like it's good for me to confront my shortcomings, I guess, and also for me to work on myself, in terms of like patience and resilience. And I don't know, like it's a challenge, and challenges are important. Like you need challenges for you to just keep your mind fresh, and for you like it really helps yourself in the future, in terms of like dementia, Alzheimer's, like that type of stuff. So it's good to keep yourself on top of things. So yeah, so that's pretty much what I meant. So like work, school's pretty great. I'm still like not doing great in terms of writing, but like that's okay. It's like I've been like my new thing right now is that yesterday I was trying to write and I wasn't really succeeding, so I started working on my assignment. So like now I have things to do that they are still important and that they still have like a lot of relevance in my life. So that is that. But yeah, so I'm stable. I'm like mentally stable. Medication seems to have stabilized me, and like my therapist, they all, they all agree that that is kind of, like that I'm doing great. So like all around, like things are working great. And for example, regarding like my health, my physical health, and like my weight, today I took the second shot, and I don't know if I'm seeing like a whole lot of like improvement so far. It's been a week, but you have to, because I said like I'm here for the long game. Like I'm not just I don't want things to kind of like just happen too fast, because then I would resume my state. So like 2 kilos per month is kind of like where I'm like focusing on. And yeah, I was, when I started this, I was at like 76, which is, it was way higher than like my usual 74. And right now I'm like 74, 73. So like technically I am kind of like making progress. The issue is like longevity, because like there are always fluctuations in your weight. So right now, well, I want to get a stable 72. Like that is kind of like my goal. So by the time I'm kind of like 1 month on this medication, that's pretty much where I want to be. And set patience, because if I lose 2 kilos per month, like I'll get below 70, and that's only half the battle, but like it's already going to be much better. I'm going to be healthier. And yeah, I have my machine is working now. So once again, like adding to this whole thing of like everything is working out fine for me. Well, fine, like everything's working out great. I'm enjoying my Zumba classes and my swimming lessons. And that is kind of like important, because I have to kind of like leave inertia whenever I have to go out and do something. So it's good that I'm like, yeah, like this is important, I'm doing this. So yeah, so I'm saying, oh yeah, and also like I'm in a really good introspective moment. I'm kind of like learning things about myself. I seem to be counteracting like some tendencies and behaviors, so that's pretty good. Also, like something that came to mind, something that like occurred to me yesterday, is that in terms of like my dreams, like I think about my more aspirational dreams, not like this stuff, because sometimes like my dream of the week is to go to a certain restaurant and eat as much as I can. So like they're kind of like more immediate. So but like there are things that I kind of want that they make for example, as an example of something that it would be a dream come true. There's like so many different variations of these videos online where people, they are describing events of a TV show, movie, book series, video game. They're kind of like breaking down the stories, and they're telling how it goes. Like those are some of my favorite videos to watch. I feel very engrossed in them, and also I think that it is good in terms of like storytelling. It's kind of like an interesting exercise for me to for me to make. So like that is kind of interesting. But yeah, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is because a dream come true would be for me to have like one of those videos made about like my novels, my books, and that is not really in the foreseeable future. And also like maybe I can be the one to make those videos. That would be interesting. Although like if it were me, like it would be kind of like a more of a, I don't know, because people usually like they bring things and they have like strings and they connect stuff and all that. So right now, but yeah, so that's something. So like that is a dream that is like very, it's not the most tangible one, but like I can make it happen, I can make it work. So whenever I'm thinking about fantasies, like how about that? Like that is something that it is a fantasy, but it is something that is kind of like grounded in my life. Because whenever I'm writing, I'm like rehearsing this story in my head, I'm kind of like doing that to some extent. Sometimes I will fantasize about something, I'll start pacing around, thinking about that, and it can be fantasy about my life and anything that all the megalomaniac things that I want. But it can also be about the story, because I'm writing this novel. It is book 3 in this series, 3 out of 4. But there's so many other series that I want to write in the same world, and these things, they're connected. So like it is important for me to kind of like establish those connections. So sometimes I will kind of, the pacing around I'm going to be doing is me kind of like developing the story, making sure that everything fits and connecting things. So like that is something that I'm totally fine with. Like I'm really in fact I'm looking forward to it in a certain way, because it feels it's very fun, so like it brings the enjoyment to my life, but it's also very fulfilling when you can make a connection, when you can kind of like unravel the story. It kind of like makes it feel like more real, and there's always so much that you can do. And yeah, like I'm just looking forward. I'm always looking forward to that, but I can always get my head in the game. As I said, like I'm struggling to write, but I do feel that today things are kind of better. I feel like when I try to write, I will actually get something out there. And I'm thinking about like moving on from where I am at, because maybe like working on a new chapter is going to have a better effect on me. And that is I don't know, yeah, but like summoning, not summoning. So in some, like my life is going pretty great. And as I started saying, like I feel kind of like, maybe as I said, like I still don't believe in anything, but like I do feel the urge to kind of like thank someone for like everything working out fine. As I said, like this hasn't really changed my stance on like the belief regarding like the belief of supernatural things. But I think it's just like an action, like maybe it's just like the spirit of gratitude that is kind of like taking over me, and is like not like just being grateful that things are working out. But that being said, what were like my personal developments yesterday and today, since like the last video. As I said, like I've been focusing more on like doable things. So for example, finishing my novel, like that is a doable thing. It's going to take some time because it is a long novel, but I want to make some progress every day. Like that's pretty much where I am at right now. Even if I cannot really produce as much as I kind of like want, as much as I think that is that I could have done, like I still want to kind of like make progress. And as I said, like I want to kind of like use every free time, with every window of free time I have, to kind of like work on my novel. And as I said, it's one of those things that I'm really random thoughts just occurred to me. I remember some content creators that I was following like probably like a decade ago. I don't know why that just came to mind. But yeah, so whatever. But like if I make any progress, like I want to celebrate that. I think in the same vein of like me being grateful for things, I think celebrating progress is also very good for your psyche. I think that makes a hell of a difference in your outlook, yeah, in the way you're perceiving and acknowledging life. So I want to celebrate the small victories. So like, yeah, because I feel like when you have like a novel that you're working on, like you're tempted to only celebrate when you get to the very end of it, but that is kind of like far away. So I think that has to have a little celebration every day to kind of like commemorate the like the progress I made, and I kind of want to do more of that in different areas of my life, not just like my writing. So for example, like at school, whenever I kind of whenever I make some type of progress, so whenever I finish an assignment, I want to celebrate that. Like this project, this assignment that I said that is like 21 pages long, when it's supposed to be like a 3 pages long thing. I will be like my no, I think that you kind of like print it out and just have it there. Naturally, like that's not the most eco-friendly thing to do, so I'm probably not gonna print it, but I do want to kind of like finish it and have it there, because I think that it was kind of like it is a landmark in a certain way regarding where I am at, because this is the first assignment that I've done in years, to be completely honest. And as I said, I was very excited about things, and at first it was kind of it felt like this is not insurmountable, that is too strong a word, but I felt this very challenging thing, like where do I start from? So but like once I got things going, I really got to a point where things are just flowing, and we have so many resources, there's so many ways for you to look at things, there's so much information out there, and pretty much why like the document got so long, because there were it was so interesting, and I can see myself getting invested in the topics we're studying. I really like this element of organization, but also of of classifying things, of like I like history basically, but like like no, because it's a lot of like personal history, there's a lot of like the documents that highlight a bigger thing, but a lot of this is like kind of like it's just telling a story, and I like stories, like that's my thing. I love writing stories, I love coming up with stories. That is the whole thing. I was even thinking that maybe one day, I don't know, I have this kind of like screen writing thing that I've had for many years, where it would be kind of like a semi-bibliographical story, but based on focusing on like the effects of essay and molestation in children, based on my own experience, and how kind of like it affected me. So I have this story which So you could argue that I could write a book about it, but I have it very vividly, like in a kind of like movie, because there's so many things you can do to kind of like highlight how a person's feeling. So I'm thinking about color grading. So like at the very beginning when we're establishing that like that character that's like based on myself, like it is very cheerful, outgoing, really enjoying life. Like you have it be very very colorful, very bright, and then, the essay happens, and I was thinking about like not seeing the whole thing right there, because the thing for me is that after like that happened, I had a bit of like an amnesia, you could say, like regarding like the events that took place, and it took like a decade for me to get to a point where I was like vividly remembering things. But yeah, so and from that point on, like things can be kind of like more muted, and then it can get a little redder when there's anger, because anger was a very dominant emotion in me, and today I can trace it back to kind of like the trauma that I had. So basically, and there's also like going to focus on that trauma, but also I think on the religious trauma, because it is also a part of it. It kind of like made things worse for me. So basically the point I'm trying to make is that like maybe I could take just try like screenwriting something, and it's a different format, but you're telling a story, and I think that it will be very good for my brain, for we kind of like this conclusion, to this whole situation, because the trauma is always going to be there, and the fact that it affected me, like, is always going to be there, and like the way it affected me, like it's always going to be very clear. But where I am at right now is kind of like freer, so I think it would be kind of like closing closing the chapter in my life. I think it would be very cathartic, and I think that because whenever if I make something, I produce something after the experience, it will feel like like there is a point, not that there is a point or that there should be a point, but I don't know, it feels like, oh, I have this thing, when I was able to transform this into art, I was able to kind of like like view something from this, and that is very important, that's very relevant to life. I don't know, because it feels like, okay, so that happened, but I have this thing to show for it. I think that this could be like a dangerous mindset to have, depending on how things went. But I think that like right now that I'm kind of healed, like I can afford to think like that, kind of like work like that. But yeah, so I was kind of like thinking about this yesterday and today. I was like, oh yeah, like that would make for an interesting movie, because it would be more like a character study. Like I'm thinking of like the various ways that I could highlight different experiences that I had. So for example, when I was 17, the essay happened when I was 13. Like I got into therapy, and I was in therapy before, but I got specifically in this therapy called EMDR, which is for trauma, and I ended up abandoning it halfway through it because it got too personal, and I was thinking about how I could kind of like, because I wasn't rude or anything, but we could make it into kind of like an anger thing, because that is a way for you to kind of like verbalize what's going on in my head, because a lot of like this story happened in my head, which is why like maybe like a screenwriter like that wouldn't necessarily, I don't know, you could think that it maybe wouldn't translate as well, but I definitely think that there are things we can do that will be able to tell the story in a subtle way without having to spill it out, because there is like, it is an outlook on myself, on the person, the character, and like what happened, but it's also like a study of like how people perceive them. So I'm thinking about, for example, the role that like my parents would play, because they are all very well intentioned and they try to help me to the best of their ability, and I'm very grateful for them, but sometimes you don't really know how to navigate the situation, particularly when you don't know what the situation is, so there's that. And I was thinking about this, and this is the type of like like fantasy that I'm kind of like okay with, because I'm basically building up a story. So someday, because it's not the first time I had this idea, as I said, like I've been having this, has coming, it comes back and then it leaves again, but it'll be interesting to write it, and I think that like every time I'm kind of like developing more the story and finding ways to tell like the story in a way that when you don't have access to this person's brain, because I feel like, for example, a lot of my writing is very focused on like the thinking aspects, like it's pretty much the characters processing things and all that, and so sometimes like it's really I'm spelling it out in a certain way, and I think it would be kind of like an interesting challenge to kind of like make that happen. And as I said, challenges are important. So I don't know, so this is, for example, an example of a fantasy, something that is actually doable. I can start writing this screenwrite, like it might never really lead to anything, but as I said, like it could be a moment of closure for me. So that is, as I said, like the type of fantasy that I can get behind, and that like it has kind of like a point, not that things have to have a point, but it would help me in a certain way. It would allow you to challenge me, and would be kind of like a good way, because like whenever you have to do something that you have a final product to kind of like show for it, like that is I don't know, like there is an extra sense of accomplishment there. That's why I think I wanted to print this assignment, which by the way is pretty, like it is the first assignment of this class, so it's pretty simple. It's pretty basic in a certain way, but like I said, I went above and beyond, and I'm glad to say, like, I missed this version of myself, because as I said, I used to be a straight A student and also like very much an overachiever, so I was always delivering more than was asked, and I really enjoy doing that. I enjoy like the process of researching and all that, but I also really liked I think that the praise that I could get, like seeing the satisfaction, because sometimes like you do something and you have to be cautious, because not cautious but like careful, because teachers and professors right have like a lot on their plate, like don't want you kind of like do something excessive that would just make their life like worse, like harder. So it's pretty much something I learned in high school. So sometimes like more isn't always better, but it is something. There's something to be said about the fact that I know sometimes like you see that like teachers, they get very they're kind of like proud of you in a certain way, and they also get happy because it shows that you're interested in what they have to teach. So there's that. For some reason, I remember in my second year of high school, in my marketing class, and there was this one assignment that I memorized the whole text that we were studying, and then in one of the questions I wrote the whole thing down, and I don't know if the teacher read everything, but I don't know, I feel very like, yeah, here I am, like just giving more than you were asking. I don't even know, because it was like like a very very long paragraph that I wrote. It was more than a paragraph actually, and I don't know, I was very proud of myself. Like, yeah, I learned this. I mean, you could argue that I was just memorizing something, so I wasn't really learning it, but I did learn it. Also, something that I'm going to say that about, because, as I said, like right now that I'm like back to doing assignments, there's a talk of, chat GPT, and I haven't really, had a whole lot of contact with it, and I have my issues with AI, just like the next person. But, something that, so first why I said that this could be controversial, but, I do think that there is a way for, that AI can help you study. Like I particularly when you have, for example, like a lot of like different texts, to kind of like like studying all that, and I was kind of like using it to study yesterday, and it was really helpful. Like I was kind of like throwing out ideas, and naturally like I learned from like whatever input they have, but I don't know, I think that it was kind of like, you could call it like an echo chamber, but I was kind of like putting out ideas, like pretty much what I got from things, and I was getting kind of like feedback from that. Naturally, I'm going to be cautious with my use of ChatGPT, because every time I use AI, like just poisoning the waters and all that. So but it was something that I was like, what, like there is some functionality to this. Naturally, I don't want to like use it to kind of like do my assignments or anything like that, but yeah, like I said, like it's interesting tool, to kind of like yeah, like it kind of like goes where for example just googling something doesn't go all the way there, because as I said, like it's an artificial intelligence, so it can kind of like give, you should have said, feedback back. So that's that. But yeah, so life is pretty good right now, and as I said, like in the topic of introspection, I want you to focus more on fantasies. They're doable. They are the immediate fantasies that I have that really have like an impact, so I'm going to be also focusing on them. For example, as I said, like going to restaurant and eating. I had a date with myself this Sunday, and it was really pleasant. I'm not gonna have one this next Sunday, but like the other one, I think I can have it, and it's going to be pretty fun, like so that is something that I'm looking forward to, and then I'm kind of like the whole week I'm kind of like excited about that, and kind of like making progress, not making progress, but like having like that moment for myself. So I want those those fantasies, but also some fantasies that have to do more for the long run, and I think that's very easy for me to get a lot of like different fantasies around me writing, that don't involve thinking of success or like achieving a certain I think I could wear more than a ring in the fingers. Kind of works out, yeah. But what I'm trying to say is that like there are a lot of things that I can focus on regarding my writing that doesn't really have to do with like me having some type of financial success or any kind of acclaim. As I said, like the final product can sometimes be the price in itself. And as I said, like that is something. The way of kind of like finishing novel, for example, is something that can carry you for years. Sometimes, because my parents have, both my novels, in there's a coffee table, like in the living room, and there is like one of those, table necklaces, and it is, rested on the books. And sometimes I would just go there and just like flip through the pages and just be really proud of myself, and like how things turn out, because it is an accomplishment. So I'm super excited by like the next time, there's going to be 3 books there, so I'm really happy. But yeah, so it's something really simple. It is very complex and complicated, like maybe I don't know if complicated is the right word, but like it is time consuming. And it is an effort, because I don't want to do it just for the sake of doing it. I want to be proud of the final product. I want to be proud not only because what I accomplished, because writing a novel like that in itself is something huge, I think, but it also of the quality. Like I want to be happy with like what I wrote down, and I think that if I can like keep going, like with this particular mindset, like I will, that is going to happen. I will be happy with what I have to offer. And it is interesting because why is it interesting? What I was gonna say, I kind of like lost my train of thought, because it is something that, as I said, like it's not that it is simple, but it is straightforward. Like the process of writing a novel. It's just very easy for you to get to a point and be like, okay, this is finished. Like this is completed. And I feel like that in itself is like something that it takes some time for you to kind of like properly process. But like the idea is that like when you get to the end, like kind of you have it going on. But like even if I don't, for example, accomplish it by the deadline established for myself, which is June, July, it's still like something, I don't know, it's still because like I will be closer to it. So even if I don't finish by July, I will be closer to kind of like completing this project. And that is like interesting. Also, I've been having some memories, some glimpses of the past of myself in high school, and I'm at a point where I can look back and no longer feel like the urge to kind of like, I no longer cringe at things, even if like at a time like they made me cringe or whatever. So like that is like it just shows maturity, I guess. Like it means that I respect myself, and the point that at the point when respect what I was experiencing, what I was living. And it is interesting because I think that like 5 years ago I was already starting like this process of no longer caring, but it was still kind of far away, so like every kind of like cringy situation that I remembered vividly, like after I graduated, like I still remember all of those, but I kind of don't care. Like I don't, and that comes from the fact that like right now I have way less pretenses to keep. I am at a point where I kind of like, I just want to be myself. I don't want to worry about how I'm perceived, and who I am. So like when I look back, I'm like, yeah, that was part of my journey. That was part of like me getting to the point where I am at right now. And for example, some of the things that make me cringe, that made me cringe, they don't make me cringe anymore. They have to do with religion, because I kind of like, you could argue that I found God when I was like 14. I grew up in a Christian environment, so like it was just kind of like a rekindling of sorts. And so like some of the things that I did and said, like they make me cringe right now. I'm just like I don't think like that anymore. And some of the things, they were embarrassing, like there's no way around it. I was very naive in some ways, like there are things that I feel like I said and I did, and then the moment after I'm like, ooh, why did I say that? Why did I do that? But as I said, like right now I'm like, yeah, whatever. I have no pretenses, I should keep, as I said, like I just want to be myself. And as I said, like that was part of my journey. So I feel like that was being in high school, I was very traumatized in a certain way. Not by high school, but I had my trauma from when I was younger, and I kind of like continued in the same high school, the school that I was in before, middle school, for like another year and a half. I changed completely, and also like my affinities, my alignments, like they also changed. I started going out with like different groups of people, and that coincided with me kind of like finding religion again. And so when I ended up being trust in this new high school, into this new school, for high school, I ended up really kind of like, it's kind of like I put myself in a cocoon, and I didn't really interact with people. So there's a lot of like me kind of like being, like awkward and shy and not really knowing how to properly say things. But I will say that some of the situations where people try to speak for me, not in a bad way, but like trying to kind of like voice something, it had to do with things that I didn't care so much. So there was that. But it's always interesting to kind of to look back, and as I said, like I look back with fondness. So like that is pretty pretty nice. Like I enjoy my high school experience. Like if I were to go back, I might have done things differently, but I only would do them differently because I know better right now with the power of hindsight. But because you could argue like I could have enjoyed things more, but some of the things that I could have enjoyed that I didn't, it's not like, it's tricky because some of those things like they felt very huge, very, once again, surmountable is a very strong word, but they felt like these things that I couldn't get past. And like right now I am very much like I would have just gone and as I said, like I think it has to do with the fact that I'm more confident in myself right now. I would like when I look back, like that were particularly, for example, in terms of like socialization, which it is something that is kind of like relevant to me right now because I'm more open and I'm actually taking steps into being kind of like socializing more. I'm kind of like taking the opportunities that come my way to interact more. So when I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, I could have interacted more. I could have like been more of a part of like certain situations. I don't know how those things would have, like how they would have affected me because I was still brought up in the family that I was brought up in. So like some of the opportunities that I said no to, I might have been, my parents might have said no to them for me, so I wouldn't really been able to kind of like interact more. Or for example, like an example I have in mind is that for example, my class, there were parties, every once in a while. And I never, been to a party, in high school. I mean, I've been to like, one of those Sweet 15, 15s in a party. I've been to one from like, college. But, like it was also really like the dress that I was wearing back then. I didn't really wear it like anywhere enough because also like it was kind of like this tiger print, but it was very muted. It was matte. So but like that's not wasn't the point. So and I was there for like half an hour, so I wasn't really engaging, and that had to do with like the trauma that I had. But even if I don't know, I could have enjoyed, for example, those parties more, is what I'm trying to say. But I don't look back, I don't feel regret regarding it because that was, my choice. And I respect myself. I respect, the younger version of myself who was like not interested in that, and who was, as I said, like very religious. And I think that was a part of it. There's also, as I said, like an element of shyness, I just, if I went to a party, I kind of like feel out of place. But I will say that, in those parties, like there seems to be kind of like, a strengthening of, bonds. So I feel like if I had, gone there, if I'd been to, any of like those events, I would have been fine. People had tried to kind of like accommodate me, and I would be kind of like alone. And, I could have just, like been drinking, so there's as well. That kind of like, takes some of our inhibitions, just throws them, demonstrates some of our inhibitions. But yeah, so I've been looking back. And as I said, like I don't regret anything. I am at a point where I can look back and appreciate what happened, appreciate what didn't happen, and kind of like respect myself and the choices I made, because that's important, because that is kind of like the kindness I want to have in the future. Like a decade from now, I want to look back, and I will probably look back and feel like, oh, I could have done more, I could have done some things differently and all that. But still respect, that like I have, my autonomy, my bodily autonomy, like my, reasoning autonomy, and just be like, yeah, I did what I could have at that point in time, and not like just what I could have, but like I did what I thought was best. And I really appreciate the fact that I have the autonomy to make the choices. And I think that my trauma kind of like contributes to like this idea, because basically, like that was a situation in which I didn't have a say. I didn't consent. Things they happened, to me. They were done to me. So I think that, like with that happening, I can appreciate, the situations in my life more, where I'm like, yeah, like I chose this, like this was like my choice, but not in a controlling way, because that is, how I used to kind of like, do things when I was, younger. I would try to kind of like retain control at any cost, and it always backfired. There's not a single situation in which it didn't, at least the ones that I can remember. But if one it worked out, I would remember that, because it would have stood out. But yeah, so I think that, for me, I've always been independent, and out there, before, the trauma, was very much out there, growing and all of that. And I think that after the trauma, I was, I internalized a lot of things, like I ended up existing much more in, like my mind castle, mind palace, than, like interacting with the real world. And that's that, like, it has to do with trauma. And like right now, I'm trying to kind of like, leave that behind a little bit. I want to live outside. I want to live outside my head. I don't want to be, I want like the past dragging me down. I just want to live, laugh, and love. I'm joking, but like it is, there's something there, like the sentiment. It's kind of like what I think I needed. But I was talking about control, and like right now, I don't think that I'm like grasping at straws, trying to kind of like have this notion that I'm in control of myself and of my circumstances, because the truth is that there are so many things that are out of your control. There's so many variables, so many things, so many elements to kind of like any situation, that it's not like the sky's the limit. That's something that we say to kind of like motivate ourselves, but like that is just not true. Like there are limitations to what we can achieve, what we can do based on, the circumstances we were born through. So, I'm not trying to be, downer here, because I still want to have like that optimistic attitude of like, yeah, I'm gonna go above and beyond. I'm going to kind of like, I'm going to try and reach the sky, but not because that is possible. It is not, but just to keep my expectations kind of high, because that there is something there. The thing people say, like you aim for the stars and you land in the moon, in the sky, something like that. But that's basically the idea. I'm kind of like keeping things, I'm being open-minded regarding what can and cannot happen, so that yeah, like I'm being, so that I can achieve more. But yeah, but something that just came to mind, that I want to say is, like alongside what I was saying, that I want to focus more on, like the things that are doable, like the things that I can do, I can make happen regarding my life. So I will have like those things going on instead of like my fantasies. There's also the fact, I kind of forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, like I want to have realistic expectations of the future. And what I mean by that is that the fantasies I have, like they're kind of like a part of who I am, and they're part of like how I see the world. And I no longer want them, as I said, like the key I think is to replace them with something else. So I want, for example, regarding the future, I want to be focusing more on college, and like on the different possibilities, the different opportunities that are going to come from me being kind of there. But also I want to think about, for example, work. Okay, instead of thinking of the fantasies in which I have infinite success, infinite wisdom, infinite resources, I want you to think about what's really going to happen, which is what's my future like, for example, professionally. It's probably going to be along the area that I'm studying right now. So I really so I want to fantasize about, for example, getting a job in this area, instead of, as I said, fantasizing about things that can happen. That, because there's also the fact that a lot of the fantasies, the way that things happen, I'm kind of like passive in a way. Like things happen, to me. Things happen that allow me to kind of like, do more. But it is always like something big happened, that led to that situation. It's never really like me reaching out and like doing that thing and making it happen. Particularly because a lot of like these things, like they're not really doable. So there's the fact that, like of course I can have, a fantasy, of like me achieving that, because as I said, it's not really doable. Or maybe like it is. There's always a chance, a possibility, that something's going to happen. So like maybe technically it is possible, but it's very unlikely. Not only very, like extremely, overwhelmingly unlikely that is going to happen, because a lot of stars have to align in a certain way. Not like, I don't mean this like literally, but like things will have to happen in a very specific context and like very specific things. Because also like that's the thing about fantasies, they start kind of generic, but like you start like building within this tapestry, of a story. So it gets to a point that's like, this is not going to happen. Maybe like if you the bones of this is possible, but like the meat, like that is not going to occur, because I kind of like created this hyper specific scenario in my head. And once again, like I want to say that there's nothing wrong with fantasizing, because technically there isn't. Like it is not like an immoral thing, unless like you're fantasizing about something immoral. But usually like the things that I'm like envisioning, like they're kind of like they're kind of like amoral. Like there's nothing there, so it's not wrong. But like the consequences, like that is bad. Like that's pretty awful, which is that like it takes you away from the time being. It wastes your time. It kind of like generates these unrealistic expectations of what your life is going to be, and that leads to you kind of like being satisfied with what you have. As I said, I'm trying to be more grateful for what I do have, and life is good, as I've already said many times in this video. Like everything is working out great for me. Like I'm in a really good moment, and I could honestly, like this is probably the best moment I'm experiencing, that I'm going through in my life. Like this is like, as I said, like everything seems to be like stable and aligned, and like all the different fronts, like I'm just, I don't know. But yeah, the point I'm trying to make is that I have everything to kind of like stay focused on my life, but yeah, that there are these fantasies, like, and they take me away. I don't want that. I want to reject them. I want to yeah, like I don't want them anymore. But it's kind of like it's stronger than me, and I do understand that some of it has to do with me being bipolar. That is kind of like a feature of that. So when I'm a little bit up here, there's always the, I really like the rings like this. I think it's nice. But yeah, but like kind of like as stars have to kind of like have to lie in a certain way for like those situations to happen, and I still can let go of them. And as I said before, I don't know if I fully accepted the fact that there will always be fantasies, but I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that fantasies, like they're there, and they're something to be said about them. That they kind of stuck. And this is not a recent thing, as I talked about before. For as long as I can remember, I've had fantasies. I will say that I think the trauma I suffered when I was 13, it did make things like worse in a certain way. Like I think that it really because that was kind of like my way to cope with things. I think that once you kind of like, I fantasized about the situation, the different situations, because they yeah, I fantasized about them because that was kind of like, that was escape number one. Like my inner world became kind of like comforting in a way. So like that was something that it was kind of hard to replicate like in real life, because I was very squirmish. That is a word. I don't know if I'm using it right though. But yeah, but I think the real life really brought forth all these different, it was kind of like there were so many triggers. So like I went inside and I kind of like I lived there. So so there is the fact that that is a way to process your emotions. Also habits, because like as I said, like that was a habit that it only grew intenser, or more intense, I think. It only grew more intense with time, because I wasn't really processing what had really happened, but things in my life, they kept reminding me of like that situation. And it's not just like there's not only the physical element of that. So for example, I was traumatized because I was held down, like I couldn't move. There was a whole thing of like I also like I hit my head, so I was kind of like dizzy. Might have gotten, I don't know if I got a concussion, but like I was dizzy and very there. So basically, like physically, I didn't want to be overpowered by anyone, for any reason, because it kind of like brought very vivid memories of like that whole situation, but also mentally in a certain way, because yeah, like in a situation where I felt like I was being oppressed in a certain way, which is why I think like bigger issues became an issue for me. So anything having to do with like gender, race, sexual orientation, religion, ethnicity, culture, all that, like those things, I felt them very hard, because they kind of like brought me back to like that situation. So I wasn't physically being, like oppressed, but like there were the other things, and there were also like daily circumstances of like whenever I was, for example, in a group, like a study group or something, and there was somebody kind of like was positioning themselves as kind of like head of that. It's kind of like the leader, like that made me feel kind of, oppressed is a strong word, like I'm making me feel subdued. Yeah, like I've seen kind of like subjugated, like yeah, like those words are very intense. But whenever I felt like I was not in control, like that became an issue for me. That was something that I kind of like had to avoid at all costs. And when I couldn't, my brain started to fantasize. As I said, there was always like like the situations in which I was in control. Control is a very big issue for me. I think that if you watch any of my videos, like you're going to get an idea that like it really is something that is something very transformative, and like the key to my liberation, I think it started with like me no longer having the urge to be in control. Is my hand shaking more than usual? Okay. But yeah, so like letting go of control, like it really changed my life. Naturally, that is easier said than done. So much so that I've been working on this for like probably a decade. Actually, no, like I think it was 2019 when I finally like decided to let go of control. And even then, like I was, I don't know. I think it's more. I'll say like half a decade. Let's go with half a decade. Where I'm trying to no longer be like that. And I am succeeding. I don't think I am at like I have completely succeeded. Because I think that my fantasies, like part of it, part of like that, it's kind of like attached to kind of like this need for control. So I think that maybe that is the key. What I have to do in the future is try to kind of like work on my control issues, and that is going to lead to me having less fantasies. And I mean, like I have no way of verifying this, but it does make sense to me. So yeah, so maybe I'm gonna get to the other side, and I'll look back and I'll be like, yeah, control, like that was the issue for me. And as I said many times before, trying to retain control, the sand metaphor, like like you kind of like lose all of it. And this is such I feel like that is almost a cliche metaphor at this point, because I hear it, I've heard it like in different contexts from like different people, and also I use it a lot. So like I'm trying to, I don't know, it feels like everything that I'm saying, like I've already said it before, I've already thought it before, but I don't know, maybe just saying it, like if I say it out loud one more time, is going to help the process, it's going to help with me kind of like getting closer to the truth. And the truth, I mean, is like a reality in which I am stable, not only regarding like me being bipolar or my ADHD, but also emotionally stable. And as I said, like I am at a point right now where I am dealing pretty well with things, but you can always do better. I'm not trying to, as I said, like you have to celebrate your victories. So like I'm celebrating myself and the state of mind that I have and all the progress I've made, but I also want to continue looking at the future. Like I want to kind of like improve that, improving that rate as well. And because I feel like I'm much freer than I used to be, but I still feel like I am in a sort of prison. It's kind of like the sentence now is like much lighter, but like I'm still there. So I don't really know how to properly connect with myself. But I know, I think that I mentioned this the other day, the situation with like Becky Bloom, in the Confessions of a Shopaholic, I think, and Confessions of Becky Bloom, yeah, I don't remember, but it's kind of like having that moment where you realize more than you thought, and that is kind of like, I think would be a very cathartic feeling. So sometimes, for example, I start talking, in these videos, and I don't know how long the video is going to be, because it depends on like how much I have to say. And sometimes, some videos I look back and I'm like, I didn't say much, and I feel like maybe, I shouldn't have recorded that. Not in a regretful way, like, it's out there, and this is a journal. Like, not every day you're going to have like an insight, something for you to work on, and that's totally fine. But some days I feel like I have more to say. I feel like there's more meaning to what I'm saying. But at the same time, sometimes it feels like some things are very repetitive, and this is, sentiment that I've had for the longest time. Like I have, like many times in my life, feeling like, okay, I'm stuck here. Pretty much the why I said it, I feel like I'm in prison to some extent, because there is, because I'm kind of stuck. I don't really know. And this is, a feeling that I remember having back in like 2017, 2018, 2019. 2019, I think it was more transformative than that. But I did learn a lot of things that, like I wish I didn't do. And then, like I was starting to like not do that. So there's, like that is, positive. But what I'm trying to say is that it felt like when I was younger, I was running in circles. Like I had this kind of like, I don't know if optimism is the right word, because like I was kind of like expecting the worst, but I did have expectations that I would do better. And for me at the time, like this was what signified change, what like kind of like showcase that, was me being able to do more, which is something that at the time I was struggling with. Oh my god, I was struggling. So for example, like my book is like a good one. My first novel came out in 2015 when I was 17. I turned 18 at the end of the year, and my second one came out in 2024 when I was 26, I think. Yeah, 26. And so it was like 8 years of like that. Yeah, let's go with 8 years, because I published the novel and then I turned 18, so it was pretty much very close by, one thing from the other. But I couldn't make progress, which is why I think this feeling I have when I can't write is like almost, I don't want to use the word traumatizing, but it is something that it's very reminiscent of those times, and I was very frustrated in those times. As I said, like I had this delusion. I had many delusions, but also like I wasn't doing much, because I had this belief at the time I was involved in religion that God had a plan for me, and I knew what the plan was. The plan was just me, like something that I wanted. So it was kind of like, so instead of like working towards that, I would just lay back and be like, God is going to provide, God is going to present me with the circumstances. And that is just not true, because I do understand that even like in a religious context, the idea that God has a plan for you, like you still have to work for it. And I think that's the thing. Like naturally, I have to consider that I was undiagnosed with like my bipolar, like disorder, like was not diagnosed. So I had a lot of depressive episodes. They were really bad. Like they left me kind of like in bed, not even able to wake up. So I have to be kind to myself, because like I had those moments, which I thankfully don't have so much anymore. So like that's life is good in that way. But I don't know, I think even like admitting this is something that I wouldn't have been able to do some years ago, because hopefully my mom's going to answer. But yeah, even that, like I had this, I think I'm going to go answer it. My mom answered. But yeah, so basically I was so I had like all this negative self-talk, where I felt like a failure. I felt that I was lazy. I felt that I was incompetent, that I was incapable, that I wasn't like smart enough, that I wasn't I don't know, like I was all these negative emotions, and I didn't really want to accept that I had them. So I was just push them down, and that didn't really help anything. It didn't make me feel any less like that. But I tried to compensate like those feelings, and like my arrogance, my pride, like they got the best of me, because as I said, I was compensating. There is a song, I think it's by Marina and the Diamonds. Right now it's just Marina, But she says, I don't remember the name, but like I feel like I'm the worst, so I always act like I'm the best. And I remember listening to that, and I was like, oh yeah, that is kind of the case. I have all this negative, internalized feelings, and I'm not really voicing them, which is kind of like one of the differences from me back then and me right now, because I still have like negative, like feelings towards myself sometimes, but right now I'm processing them, and I'm being patient with myself and being kind towards myself, because that's the thing. Like back then, like the more I felt, that I feel like the more I needed to be kind to myself, so I could probably work through those things. The worse, the less kind I was. Like I was being very harsh, and it's one of those things that I would I kind of like think like that towards somebody else, and in a way, I don't know if I would have, because I think that I was all this, I really cared about people and all that, so I don't think I would have felt that way. But, towards, myself, I think actually, like, I did feel that way towards other people, but I was kind of like, like pushing those emotions down. So, yeah, so I think that was just, it's very negative all around, like there was a lot of, there's a lot there is a lot to say about myself in those days, and right now I can look back and no longer feel like that they were wasted times, even though that is kind of uh, like because I don't have much to show from those years, and that is kind of like a problem. And it was a problem for me in the past. Like right now, I'm more like, I'm kind of like living the past in the past, and I'm going to focus on what I can do, which is why I think sometimes, like when I start to not be able to write, I have almost like this panicky feel. It's not as panicky anymore, but like it is this very intense feeling of like, oh my god, am I going back to that? Like am I going, am I regressing? And that is something that you're always going to have to face that. Basically, what I'm trying to say, like regardless of like how well things are going for you, like there's always going to be like a certain level of frustration, and the key is to like learn how to deal with it, instead of like learning how to deal with frustration instead of like succumbing to kind of like the negative feelings that you have. And I think that this is one of those things that it's an exercise. You have to kind of like practice this to get to a point where you're no longer like falling prey to like those tendencies, those behaviors, but also it is something that as a practice, but it also helps because I think that you have to have tools to handle like what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And when you don't have them, like for example, like I have a tendency to have depression, like I have a tendency to have this episode, like it's kind of like they come and then just make things worse. So you have like that's kind of like my take, is that you have to kind of like develop strategies, and those strategies, they can be almost as important as medication, basically, because medication is going to keep you stable, it's going to get you to the point, but like those strategies are going to help you continue to kind of like to help you manage that situation. So right now I feel like I am doing better than I've ever dealt with things before, and that is in part of like me kind of like focusing more. One of the strategies, as I said, this should not exist so much in my fantasies, but like in real life, kind of like have anchors, like I talk about a lot about anchors, but like they are important, like they make a huge difference, so it's important for you to not forget them. But also kind of like resilience is the name of the game, because you have to withstand changes in the world. As I said before, a lot of like the things that affect me, they're not directly connected to me. They have to do with the world, the state of affairs. And I really think that the state of affairs, and I really think that there is you have to exist independently from like the world around you. I don't think that you have to isolate yourself and be an island. Like no, you have to connect. But I feel like those connections have to be more important than like bigger things that are happening out there, because that is like that is. Because like things are always going to happen, and you need longevity, and you have to ask yourself, like, do you really want to continue living? For example, like that is a conversation that I haven't had so much lately, but I've had historically with myself. And I'm not gonna lie, a lot of times the answer is no. I'm not really I guess I was not really ready for things. And like right now, the answer for me is yes. So if like that motivation, and this is also like a result of like medication. Like I'm feeling stable, so like I think the jump start is, you know, like you're feeling that way. You're feeling like things are kind of like stable, as I said. But yeah, so you have to kind of like ask yourself, you know, is it worth it? And sometimes, as I said, the answer is going to be no. But you know, if like that's the case, like don't just give up. You know, just go through the day and ask yourself, you know, tomorrow, like, is it worth it? And I think that that is something that I've been doing, because there's been a couple of seconds, a couple of moments, you know, the past you know few months where I've had, you know, doubts. And you know, like more than like not having doubts, like, you know, it's better for you to kind of like learn how to handle that, because there's always going to, something's always going to happen, you know, that's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I think we're gonna wrap this up right now. I think I probably keep on, you know, saying things. And as I said, like, I'm really happy with some of the stuff I said today, because, you know, admitting those negative feelings I had, admitting that like I didn't do anything 2016, 2017. I mean, it's not entirely true. I tried things, but I had like nothing to show for those years. And I think it's cathartic for me to just be like, yeah, like nothing happened. I did nothing. I did not grow as a person. I mean, I did. I made progress, but like I think I was still too stuck in the past and in my traumas. So there's that. But yeah, so ultimately, it feels good to say this. Nothing 2016, nothing 2017, 2018. I started doing, you know, stuff, but you know, I was still, because I think like I wasn't doing anything in terms of like what I wanted to be doing. So like work wise and school wise, like those areas were not flourishing, they were not developing, and like those were very important to me. Like right now, I have much more well-rounded, you know, like expectation of my life. Like I have many more things going on, and some of those other things, they're more important than work and school, you know. So that is, you know, like an interesting thing. So pretty much why like I felt like I did nothing, you know, like nothing happened, you know, like I was useless. I was not useless, you know. As I said, I had to be kind to myself because there were episodes and all that. But you know, it was cathartic to say, you know, because it's the type of thing that, you know, 5 years ago I wouldn't be caught bad admitting that. So I don't care anymore, but like in the best way possible. So anyways, bye.